Last year saw a big step forward in many ways for the sport of cricket on the Isle of Man. Internationally, the island was able to make its mark in several areas. The senior men's team reaching the finals of the ICC T20 World Cup sub-qualifiers and the formation and first matches for a brand new women's international T20 squad. Their efforts were recognised in the 2022 Isle of Man Sports Awards last month too, with the men's team scooping the Team of the Year prize and their coach, Greig Wright, securing the Coach of the Year accolade. Now, ambitions for the sport locally are taking another step, with a new cricket strategy for the Isle of Man being published, hoping to grow the game over the next 4 years up to 2027. So, what do they want to achieve? What will it take to hit their objectives? I spoke to Isle of Man Cricket Development Officer Greig Wright to find out more.
We're focusing on women and girls cricket, high performance cricket, cricket in education, coaches and umpires, and then digital, which can cover all areas from within our own operatings to how we actually then utilise analysis, but also publicising the game and promoting it as well.
Let's start with the first one you mentioned there, women and girls cricket. It was a bit of a landmark in 2022. The women's team, the T20 women's team, competing for the first time and looking to compete again in 2023. So how big a set of strides have already been made in 2022 to get to that point, to get that women's team up and running? Over
last year, there was a lot of success within the clubs in relation to having women's leagues operating. So we ended up with 9 teams who played in festivals on a weekly basis. That's been changed for this coming year. There's only 8 teams playing, but whilst that might seem like a drop in numbers, it's not, because those 8 teams have gone into 2 divisions, and Division 1 will be playing more of a proper format of cricket, and Division 2 will still be then playing with a softball pairs sort of inclusive format.
A drop in one team maybe, but the idea that you're going to be able to, I suppose, focus with those 8 teams across those 2 divisions, does that mean that because there's maybe one less team, there's more players involved in each team, I suppose, and it creates more competition?
Yeah, the numbers have increased, and the numbers will increase again this year, so there'll still be additional opportunities for more people to get involved. We're not set at just having 8 teams of 10 players, for instance, and then there's only 80 players, so there'll be a lot more opportunity for more players to be involved, but it allows us to then focus on bringing an opportunity for the players who want to then progress to the higher level, more of an opportunity to play in a more traditional format, understand the rules and understand how to play cricket in a more truer sense.
Now, of course, a lot of the spotlight was on the women's senior T20 team being set up last year, but of course there's been, I think as you've pointed out as well, there's been an increase in the amount of junior involvement in girls cricket as well. So what's it going to take between now and 2027 to continue to increase that year on year?
We're continually working within the primary schools, so we get access to a lot of the younger girls. Our main target over the next 4 years within the strategy is to try and get girls cricket onto the curriculum in secondary schools. We've managed to get into every school and deliver some form of cricket, and every secondary school is now delivering some sort of cricket in the PE lessons. Ideally, we'd like that to be more formalised. Obviously, the teacher action short of strike has held off on the ability to play inter-school games and such like, but we are seeing a lot more cricket in schools. That we see that as being the biggest entrance to seeing significant growth if we can get girls in secondary school playing more regular, more often.
And one of the objectives that's outlined in here is you want to have women and girls sections in 6 clubs by 2026. How important is that, and also how are you going to reach that?
It's essential that girls and women are playing in their own club and they don't see our activities as being their club. Obviously there has to be a pathway from schools, clubs to the island set up. When we were actually planning the structure for the strategy, 6 clubs was the target, because we have 6 junior sections within clubs as well. We've got 8 clubs, 6 have got junior sections, 2 operate solely on seniors. Over this winter we've actually managed to get up to 6 already, so we've already ticked that box off a bit earlier than we hoped, but we still want to have significant strides within there and a very good women's sections in each.
One of the objectives in terms of high performance is to have both men's and women's teams in the ICC ranking positions in the top 35. Now, it doesn't say a particular year for that. So is that by 2027?
Yeah, that's the final goal, 2027, to have both teams in and around the top 35.
The men's team already, I say the men's team because they've, I suppose, just got more experience of the system as it stands, but are already sort of knocking on the door of those standings at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, the recent series in Spain, which we don't mention too much, has dropped us down from 39 to 46, but that was a very worthwhile experience because it allows us to understand the work that we've got to do over the next few years to be not just there as a number, but be there competing regularly and higher than that if possible. The women's, the internationals that we play later this year, which are all now scheduled, will give us the 8 games that we need to actually have a ranking position, and then we'll see whereabouts we'll sit within that and the work we need to do.
Once you have these latest matches that are upcoming for both the men's and women's sides, and you have a bit more of an accurate picture, I guess, of where you sit in the rankings, at least initially, how do you take it from there? What sort of work will be required over 12 months or 2 years, for example?
We're quite fortunate in the way, in particular with our men's team, that they're a very young group, so it allows us to focus on things for a longer term in relation to the performance pillars of technical, tactical, physical, mental, and it gives us a longer time to actually work on all different areas over a period of time and focus on one at a time more than anything, so the lads can get bigger and stronger over the next 4 years, which will allow them to hit the ball further. The ladies in particular will play more games of cricket, therefore the tactical nous will strengthen and grow, which they're the sorts of things that will actually help us progress.
What are the sort of things over the next few years you can maybe learn from these other matches? You've already said that the men's and women's teams in their respective games have been taking plenty of lessons from the performances they've had. So what other things could you learn, do you think, from other nations, other counties in England?
The game's T20 is evolving all the time, so I don't think anyone has found a real set model that you say, right, that's what you do, we'll copy that. Every country has its own way of playing, devised primarily around its own strengths. So we tend to look at a lot of what we do. There are certain things that your analysts will look at in relation to number of boundaries scored, and the more successful sides will score the most boundaries, etc. If you go back only 2 years ago, it used to be that number 1, 2 and 3 in the batting order would be the ones who win the game of cricket for you. That's now evolved to number 6, 7 and 8 are the most important because they're the ones that hit the big runs at the end. So the game's changing so much that we've just got to make sure that we can stay on top of it, but continually focusing on what we do and being the best that we can be, and then I'm still confident that we'll then beat a lot of the opposition that we come against.
Looking maybe to a bit of a cross here, I think, between maybe the coaches and umpiring, but also the education side of things. The Isle of Man, in terms of both players and coaching staff, just naturally won't have as big a pool as, say, if you look across in the northwest at Liverpool, Manchester, Lancashire, Cheshire, or anything like that. There are some ambitious targets in there over the next 4 years for Isle of Man cricket. So how do you actually build the infrastructure, the coaches, the umpires, to make sure that the players and the coaching staff are able to continue progressing?
Primarily comes down to participation and encouraging people to just get a genuine love for the game. Children tend to bring adults along with them. The adults then become the next generation of coaches, stroke umpires, stroke officials, etc., etc. So one tends to bring 3. So a young 6, 7-year-old boy or girl can end up bringing parents, brothers, siblings. So that then grows the number of people involved in cricket hugely. That's why we focus so much on the junior participation, because that will also help all the other elements that we're looking to achieve. Obviously, retiring players will help a lot as well. We've still got quite a young populace of people playing around cricket, so we don't envisage having that many retiring too soon, to be fair.
And on the coaching side, you'll see it elsewhere in other nations of sometimes coaches being brought in, for example, to lead a team, whether it's the senior teams or the junior teams. Do you envisage that ever happening with the Isle of Man over the next 4 years, or is the focus very much based on having Manx players, Manx staff to keep the game local?
It's always been my belief when I came across here, which sounds a bit back to front because obviously I was brought across here to do that job, but I still firmly believe of developing the necessary skill sets and infrastructure with people from the Isle of Man to actually do these jobs. So the umpiring and the coaching's actually, it's my job, so I'm not going to give that away too quickly. Otherwise, I'm putting myself out of a job. But we do bring people across every now and again just to offer a different view, a different voice. But I don't see longer term that we'll go outside of what the island are producing. We're even looking at younger people now who are leaving education and potentially then moving into coaching as part of their development, with the potential to actually work within our coaching structures in years to come on a part or full-time basis.
On the player perspective, I guess, in terms of growth, when you look at some of the teams that the Isle of Man has at the moment, whether it's the local or the senior teams, particularly the senior men's squad, there's quite a lot of young players in there who already have quite a lot of experience of playing international cricket against some good senior players and teams. So how exciting a time is this in terms of growth for Isle of Man cricket if you've got players like that? And there will be some in the women's squad as well in the local leagues, that you've got players that have longevity that could continue developing over numerous years.
From looking at it in the perspective of what they can achieve, it is genuinely very, very exciting. They're a really, really young group. I think the average age is around 20 with the men's team. I think slightly older with the women's, maybe around 28, something like that. But there's a lot of younger girls going to be coming into that this year as well. So for those players and for us, it's genuinely exciting. It also then creates a bit more of a headache for the younger players coming through to then have the same opportunities as these younger players had. Obviously, if the turnover of players from the senior side aren't going to be as regular,